Welcome to Teolumen Insights, where we reveal the hidden forces that shape the way you live and show you how to use them to create real transformation and supercharge your health, mindset, and daily life. Here are your hosts, Emma Greenwood and Nathan Sinclair.
All right, so get ready to dive into some seriously big ideas today. We're tackling Thomas Kuhn's paradigm shift. And you guys know, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like, I don't know, swapping out an old flip phone for the latest smartphone. Total game changer.
And the thing is, Kuhn's work, it's not just like ancient history of science, It's a framework. It's like a lens we can use to understand how any field, any idea really, goes from a jumbled mess to a well-oiled machine.
So let's break this down. We keep hearing paradigm, but what does it actually mean?
Okay, imagine building a house. You wouldn't just start like randomly sticking bricks together, right?
Definitely not.
You'd need a blueprint. That shared understanding of what you're building, how to build it, that's your paradigm. The foundation, the methods, everything everyone in a field agrees on.
So like before Einstein came along and changed everything, physicists were working with a totally different blueprint for how the universe worked.
Exactly. Before you get that one dominant theory, it's like everyone's using different tools, speaking different languages. Imagine building a skyscraper with one team using wood, another using straw, and another using steel beams.
Oh, wow. Okay, I get it. Total chaos.
Yeah, total chaos. And that's what Kuhn calls the pre-paradigm phase. He uses early quantum mechanics before the Copenhagen interpretation. And yeah, it was a bit of a free-for-all.
A scientific Wild West.
Exactly. Full of potential. But a lot of wasted energy, too, because there's no common ground.
You know, that actually reminds me of working at a startup or even just starting a new project. You have all this excitement and potential, but it's also like, let's just try everything and see what sticks.
It is. But then someone finally says, okay, we're building a Victorian mansion, and everyone gets on the same page. That's normal science, as Kuhn calls it. Intense focus, real productivity.
Everyone has the blueprint, they know where to paint the walls and the windows, and suddenly, bam, progress.
And I feel like there's always a but with Kuhn.
There's always a catch, right?
Yeah.
As comfy as that paradigm gets, it can also create these blind spots.
Here we go. This is where it gets juicy. We get comfortable, and then, bam, anomalies. Things that just don't fit the blueprint.
And what happens? Usually we just ignore them or dismiss them, explain them away. We like our neat little boxes or established ways of doing things. Makes sense, though, if you've built a whole career on a certain paradigm, you're not going to be thrilled about something that might totally overturn it. It's like that story of Alfred Wegener and continental drift. He had the matching coastlines, the fossils.
But it took decades for his ideas to be accepted because they challenged everything at the time. Kuhn talks about this extraordinary claims needing extraordinary evidence. You almost have to hit people over the head to get them to consider it.
It's like Kuhn said, science sometimes progresses one funeral at a time. Which, okay, morbid, but also kind of funny in a dark way.
Well, it makes a point. The old guard, the ones married to the current paradigm, might need to, well, move on for a new generation to take over.
It's like that example we have about the miasma theory of disease. People thought bad air caused illness for centuries.
Even when we had germ theory, solid evidence, it took ages for people to accept it. Makes you wonder what groundbreaking ideas we're ignoring right now just because they challenge the current dogma.
Right. So we've got all these anomalies, these cracks in the foundation. What happens next? This is where things get really interesting. Revolution time.
Right. This is where Kuhn's ideas really shine. All those anomalies, the stuff we tried to explain away, it just keeps piling up until you can't ignore it anymore. The old paradigm starts to break down, and that's when the door opens for something new.
It's like that saying, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
Yeah, exactly. It's often the people who are least attached to the old ways, the newcomers, who could really see the potential in these anomalies. They become the champions of a new paradigm.
And it's kind of funny. Kuhn describes these shifts as happening one funeral at a time. Morbid, but also kind of true.
Well, yeah. Think about it. If your whole career, your reputation, is built on certain beliefs, it's tough to admit you might be wrong. It's way easier for someone new to say, hold on, what if we looked at it this way?
Makes sense. So who are these paradigm shifters? Our source mentions Barbara McClintock and her work on genetic transposition.
Oh, she was incredible. Jumping genes totally changed how we think about genes, how they're structured, how we inherit them. But her work totally dismissed it first.
Really?
It didn't fit the accepted paradigm at the time. It took decades for the scientific community to catch up and realize how brilliant her discoveries were.
And she won a Nobel Prize eventually, right?
Yeah.
Talk about vindication. So we've talked about these big historical examples, but what about now? What about the things on the fringes of science, the stuff that makes people say, that's interesting, but where does that fit in with Kuhn's ideas?
That's a great question. And it's something Kuhn wrestled with, too. His framework helps us understand how science has progressed historically. But that doesn't mean that anything outside the current paradigm is wrong. It just means it's got a harder path to acceptance.
So he's not saying if it's not mainstream science, it's bogus.
Not at all. What he's really encouraging is to be critical, but also open-minded. To remember that what we think of as scientific is shaped by the paradigm of the time, and we know those can change.
So how do we find that balance? Being open to new ideas without throwing out scientific rigor.
It's tricky, that's for sure. But I think it comes down to curiosity, critical thinking, and being willing to follow the evidence, even if it leads us somewhere unexpected.
Like with parapsychology, which our source talks about, telepathy, precognition. That's still considered fringe science, but you've got researchers doing really rigorous work trying to see if there's something more to it.
Exactly. And Kuhn reminds us that those fringe ideas, the ones that challenge the status quo, those often turn out to be the most revolutionary. They make us rethink everything. And that's how progress happens, in science and just in life.
So we need to be more open to those paradigm shifts, those moments when our whole understanding of things changes.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe we'll even be lucky enough to be a part of one ourselves.
So we've gone through all these massive scientific upheavals, times when, like, everything we thought we knew got flipped on its head. But let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. What does this all mean for those of us who aren't, winning Nobel Prizes? What about our own personal paradigms, those deep down ways of thinking we all have?
And that's what's so great about Kuhn's work, right? It's not just about science with a capital S. It's about how we, like as humans, figure out the world. We all have our own paradigms, those beliefs that shape how we see things, how we make decisions, even who we think we are.
So if I'm feeling stuck, whether it's my job, a relationship, or even just in my own head, maybe that's a sign I need to shake things up a bit. Look for those anomalies in how I'm thinking.
Exactly. That's where real change happens, when we're brave enough to say, what if I'm wrong about this? Maybe there's a whole different way of looking at this. It's like that saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten.
Okay. That's a little direct, but I get it. But how do we actually do that? How do we get better at those personal paradigm shifts?
It starts with being curious. Instead of immediately shooting down an idea because it doesn't fit with what you already believe, ask yourself, what if they're onto something? What if there's something here I'm not seeing?
So being open to being wrong, that's a tough one.
Oh, it's definitely tough. But think about how freeing it is, too. Remember, just because you embrace a new way of seeing things doesn't mean the old way was completely wrong. It's more like you're stepping back and seeing a bigger picture.
I like that, the bigger picture idea. So curiosity is key. What else?
Critical thinking, for sure. Don't just accept everything at face value. Look deeper, you know. Ask questions, find the evidence. Be willing to really examine things, even stuff that already lines up with your beliefs.
Because we can be biased and not even realize it. We were talking earlier about how the scientific community can be slow to accept new ideas. It makes you think, how much amazing stuff are we missing out on because we're clinging to old ways of thinking?
It really makes you think, right? And it brings us back to that idea of being open to the fringe, those ideas that might seem out there at first but could totally change everything.
Like with Dan Sheckman, from our source, discovers quasicrystals, a totally new type of matter, and the scientific world basically laughed at him, but he stuck with it, the proof was there, and bam, Nobel Prize. What a story.
It's a good reminder that real progress often comes from challenging what everyone thinks is true, from having the guts to say, what if we're wrong? Even if it means facing resistance, or even people making fun of you.
So it sounds like we should all try to be more open-minded, more critical in our own thinking. Don't be afraid to question ourselves, to explore those fringe ideas, and remember, what we believe is true is often just shaped by the current paradigm. And those paradigms, they can totally change.
Exactly. And who knows, we might even find ourselves changing some paradigms of our own.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the work of Thomas Kuhn. We hope exploring these ideas of paradigms, anomalies, and how we navigate between the old and the new has given you a new way of thinking about how change happens. So stay curious, question everything, and never be afraid to embrace those out there ideas. You never know what you might find.